Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan is perhaps the most important voice in the world today. And the reason he's the most important voice in the world is because what he does is have conversations. He engages in dialogue, discourse, discussion, debate, and he spends an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours or longer simply talking to people and getting their viewpoint and getting their opinion or getting their expertise or knowledge on all different types of subjects. He doesn't filter, he doesn't have an agenda that's linked to a political party. He doesn't have a specific ideology that he's beholden to. He doesn't have anyone telling him what to say. And he speaks to both left and right. And he is the antithesis of what media and the Democratic Party want. Make no mistake, this is a political issue because one political party has an echo chamber called American media. And if you fall outside of that echo chamber, if you fall outside of that paradigm of thought, if you don't adhere to the consensus, or if you don't worship or revere the prevailing mentality on a number of topics, you've committed blasphemy and heresy, and you're a big problem. So Joe Rogan should absolutely take that $100 million offer from Rumble. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to why he has 100 million views. This is 100 million views per month. This was just actually a couple years back. 100 million views per month. That's what he was that's what his podcast or his YouTube channel was estimated to receive. That's far more. He easily surpasses by a factor of maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 cable news. Hit subscribe, by the way, to this channel. Hit subscribe to the Stock Market Crash channel. That's below in the pinned comment. To my super chat, I can't thank you enough. You help me do these live streams. If you enjoy these live streams, your super chat is greatly appreciated, and I could do more live streams. So thank you so very much. You want to give me your thoughts on Joe Rogan, on the Rumble offer, on Spotify or the stock market or Alec Baldwin or Joe Biden, anything that's going on in the news, President Trump, give me your thoughts. President Biden, give me your thoughts below. Or in the super chat. So, a couple of things I want to talk about. Speech, money is speech in this day and age, okay? You can look just really quickly. He had 100 million views per month. If you look at just in June of 2020, they had, let's see, per month, Fox News had 3.97 million primetime viewers in a month. Okay. In the 25 to 54 demographic, Fox News only had 792,000. Okay, Tim Pool does way better than that every day. Or matches that every day. There are a number of YouTubers that do that every day. Okay? There have been days in the past couple of years that I have approached that or done that. But, like, there are a number of people do that every single day. Joe Rogan does that, I mean, in less than a day, probably in 4 or 5 or 6 hours. And MSNBC is 401,000. So you're talking about this is why they want to silence him. In the 25 to 54 demographic, okay? In 1 month, MSNBC only reached 401,000 people. Okay? And this was 2 years ago when media was making a lot more money than it is now. Because notice when our beloved President Mashed Potato Brains got into the White House, suddenly everything was more subdued. But think about that for a second. As of June 2020, Fox News was the most watched cable news network in the United States and continues to do well in terms of its primetime audience with 3.97 million primetime viewers that month. News consumption was high among U.S. audiences. Viewers turned to their preferred networks for updated. Okay, Fox News viewers in the 25 to 54 demographic reached 792,000, while MSNBC had just a 401,000. That's terrible. That's terrible per month. Even if it was per day, if I'm reading this wrong. Let's see. It says 3.97 million viewers in that month. News was high. So reached, okay, when looking at CNN, 25 average, but the overall average is noticeably different. CNN has been losing. So if it's, I can't really, I don't know if they're saying 401,000 per day, but that's still bad. If it's 401,000 per day, Joe Rogan, that's like a tiny fraction of what Joe Rogan does in a day. Okay, because it's starting off saying 3.97 million in a month for Fox News. Fox News viewers in the 20 reached. Okay, so if it's an average of 792,000 a day, or an average of 401,000 per day for MSNBC, it's still nothing compared to what Joe Rogan does. Orange Grove 55! Orange Grove 55, thank you. I do videos on theme parks, but you are a huge inspiration for me to start my channel. Love you, man. Keep it up. Thank you, Orange Grove 55. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Keep on doing those videos, and that's awesome. Keep on doing those videos. Fantastic. I appreciate being I appreciate you saying that, and thank you so much. Orange Grove 55, thank you so much to my super chat. Thank you. So, thank you, Orange Grove 55, and thanks for the kind words. So that's why he's such a huge problem. They don't want opposing viewpoints because their viewpoints, their ideology cannot be, people don't resonate towards victimhood and, preaching and condemning and pontificating and this warped, distorted view of history or morality. And people don't gravitate towards the freak. Thank you. People don't gravitate towards the left-leaning viewpoint of life. It's actually a very loud but relatively small number of people when you compare it to the 320 million Americans in the country. Most people don't look at life like they're being oppressed and they need media to tell them what to do or to help them live their lives or to keep them safe. Most people don't look at government or media as a friend. Or, I mean, even Chris Cuomo said this: media is not your friend. I mean, pretty much he said that to Michael Cohen. Okay, okay. So, so let's look at that. CNN's losing viewers. So let's see. Let's see. CNN, for example, is losing viewers. So CNN loses 90% of tuning out. Viewership at scandal-plagued CNN plummets by as much as 90% from last year in both overall audience and an advertiser-coveted 25 to 54 demographic. Okay? The network averaged just 548,000 viewers. So, again, a lot of YouTubers do better than that. A lot of YouTubers. A great many. Okay? There haven't been many days that I've done better than that, but there have been days during election cycles where I've done better than that. By the way, hit subscribe and tell your friends. We're almost at 200,000 subs, ladies and gentlemen. That's terrible. He gets 100 million views. Joe Rogan gets 100 million views per month. 100 million. That was 2 years ago. He has a much larger audience now. Okay? CNN averages 100 million, around half a million views per day. So that's a tiny fraction of what Joe Rogan does in a month. And you're getting most of Joe Rogan's audience is in that 25 to 54 demographic. So he is a juggernaut. He is a behemoth. He is a monster. They can't deal with him. They have to silence him because you have to understand these are the people who cheated Bernie Sanders. These are the people who blamed Russia for losing in 2016. These are the people who baseless allegations against Trump, accused him without any evidence of working with the Kremlin, who used a Steele dossier, purchased a Steele dossier that was a compilation of baseless allegations. Literally purchased baseless allegations. Of course they want Joe Rogan silenced because he gives people a voice. Lord. He gives people a voice, and he's not filtered by any organization, any political party. He doesn't have to embrace the rear end of any political leader. Media is public relations now. These journalists in media are lifelong Democrats. That's what this is about. When I was on the left, for example, I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet for like a tiny moment in time, according to the Huffington Post. And I was the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. Those links are on my website. You could read my writing in The Hill, the Huffington Post, Salon, the Jerusalem Post, the Federalist, on hagoodman.com. Read my article in the Federalist. It'll be below in the pinned comment on the stock market crash we're seeing in slow motion. And we're going to see the 2,000 to 3,000 point drops. We're heading into a recession. It's going to be a devastating financial crisis, and I've been talking about that and warning everybody. And I predicted all of that in the Federalist article. But ladies and gentlemen, what did they do when, for example, when my writing was catching steam, and it was shared on Facebook hundreds of thousands of times. Articles that I wrote were shared hundreds of thousands of times. And then you get hit pieces. So what did that lead to? That led to hit pieces. The Daily Beast published a completely absurd article just to disparage me because I was not part of the little paradigm of thought that said, oh, you can't vote for anyone else other than Hillary Clinton in 2016. So the only thing the quote unquote journalist had on me was that I didn't want to talk to him. And that's it. And then, of course, the pontificating and the condemning and judging. And then he wrote a book on AOC, which is hilarious. Because how do you go from condemning a Bernie Sanders, the biggest Bernie Sanders booster at that time, to then writing a book about AOC? Well, we know, because AOC is not a threat or a problem to the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders was for a tiny moment in time. And so anything that is viewed as an obstacle to one political party needs to be silenced. That's the issue. They want to silence any viewpoint. They want to suppress, and then they do so with the absurd logic. Well, you're free to say what you want, but you're not free from consequences, but they don't level consequences in the same manner against everybody. You can go a list of people, okay? Joy Reid, Cenk Uygur, Hunter Biden, all of these people either use that horrible, the worst word in the English language, or wrote bigoted, horrible things, and then blamed Russia, as always, which is the blankie, the like little defense mechanism, the security blanket for Democrats, blaming Russia for everything. So they want to silence him because he allows different viewpoints, and they cannot have a different viewpoint. Even though everyone can see with their own eyes, they're almost always wrong. They're almost always wrong. Thank you, Eric. I agree with you on that. Eric, H526, Luke St. Martin, two of the best moderators, the best moderators in YouTube. Thank you. I have to invest more on my website. I actually had a web designer create a membership for my website to where I could post videos. So there's things that I can do. The thing is now, YouTube is the dominant platform. Okay. Thank you, Eric. YouTube is the dominant platform. And it is the easiest way. And in terms of, compensation, it has the best, compensation of any platform. And it's the most prevalent or, best way to get your words or message or videos seen by the world at this point right now. Now, Spotify, Rumble, other platforms are growing. Okay. Joe Rogan is the number one media personality in the world. If you want to say number one podcast. So anywhere he goes, he's going to benefit the platform. It is disappointing that Spotify, it's good that they refused to silence him, but it's also bad that they pulled segments. And the thing is, they keep saying information is harmful, but they can't prove it in a court of law. They can't prove anything they say when what's his name? Neil Young or all of these 70s rockers, Joni Mitchell, I think who's the other guy? all of these like 60s and 70s rockers, like the revenge of the 80-year-old rockers. All of these, like, and this is not even like metal or rock. It's like kind of folk music. But this is a man who's saying, "Keep on rocking in the free world," and and then decades later, he wants to actually suppress dialogue and discussion, and then he accuses Rogan of harming people with information he hasn't proven. Like when they say, "Oh, this information harms people," they haven't proven that. They can't prove that. They cannot prove that any information harms anybody. They can't do that. So it's here's the issue. It's like they can't silence him, they can't cancel him, and so they're going to try to take, you know, they'll make a clip, a deceptive clip, and they won't give you a compilation of Joy Reid's writing, okay, or Cenk Uygur's writing, or Hunter Biden's emails, where he's using that word numerous times. The worst word, and I agree. I agree that only Black and African American people can use the word, nobody else can. I do agree with that. I agree with that. But Joe Rogan apologized. And Jimmy Kimmel did worse. Much worse. Jimmy Kimmel did something that you could say is truly, truly bigoted and horrible. And of course, it was within the context of a skit or comedy, but at the same time, it wasn't even funny. There was no humor to it. It was kind of malicious. And of course, he's not, no one even brings it up. So, it's kind of like the ideology on the left cannot function simply with mere debate. They have to have, and this should show you that they're on the ropes. Once you have Trump Republicans in the House and the Senate, and you have a different generation of political activists or political ideology, you're not going to have this apoplectic response. Laughing dog! Fact, MSM's overt disinformation has led to more correct information getting out. Yes, I agree. Laughing dog, thank you. Because the information can't be suppressed. I mean, you can look at, you can just look at what's taking place. The information can't be suppressed. Ideas cannot be, destroyed or suppressed or silenced or erased. An idea resonates based on the merits of the idea. It, generally, the best ideas win out, unless you have an entire global media apparatus and governments pushing one viewpoint. Okay, they shut down economic activity 2 years ago. Now we're finding out it was a complete waste. Well, we already knew that. Laughing Dog, thank you so very much to my super chat. Thank you. We already knew that. But I mean, they didn't allow, they prevented hundreds of millions of people. They prevented hundreds of millions of people. Hundreds of millions of people from working throughout the world. And they said it was for your benefit, to keep you safe. And It led to record high in inflation. It led to a catastrophe, an economic catastrophe. And that's just one example. Just one example. We've never had this, like, people have never had the ability to silence and suppress dialogue in the manner they do now because platforms for speech were never so easily silenced or intimidated. So, and also, media never really took a side. So, you could have like Noam Chomsky, for example, would have been accused of harmful information throughout his whole life, but he was never accused of that throughout the 80s, 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. He was never accused of that. The idea of what's called misinformation, that is another way of saying we're offering a rebuttal, and we're phrasing or we're marketing the rebuttal. We're redefining what it means to engage in a debate. We're saying that what you've said is misinformed, and therefore we're going to correct your viewpoint, refute your viewpoint, call it a fact check, and put a period at the end of the sentence, and that's it. No more debate or discussion. So the whole point is they don't want any ongoing dialogue, discussion, debate, discourse. They don't want Joe Rogan to speak to any professor or expert or highly educated doctor, researcher. They don't want anybody that disagrees with the prevailing mentality, because oftentimes on lots of issues, the prevailing mentality cannot be people who engage in people who push the prevailing narrative on a lot of topics can't answer basic questions. A basic question now. Exactly, our day. Exactly. If they went through Howard Stern, it's game. It's end of Howard Stern if they did that to Howard Stern. It would be the end of Howard Stern. And I mean, you couldn't have Sam Kinison, Mel Brooks. And there are things that, like, for example, there's a clip about Joe Rogan talking about a brain or brains. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I think he was meant a mindset. There was one thing that he was when he was talking about one experience that he did say that was you know, that was offensive, but he apologized for that. And people make mistakes. People, like, the only people allowed to make mistakes are on the left. That's it. The only people allowed to get empathy or to make a mistake. The only people allowed to say sorry are people on the left. If, for example, Whoopi Goldberg wasn't fired. If she was a conservative, she would have been outright fired. And we can go through a list. I mean, you can go through a list. Bernie Sanders had to unendorse. He had to unendorse Uyghur. Why? Well, because at first he endorsed the man, then he had to unendorse him, the $20 million venture capital people who want Medicare for all. He had to unendorse him. He had to basically get unendorsed. Because of an outrage brigade on Twitter. Okay? So that's what it's all about. It's about intimidation. It's about an intimidation. Um, it's about intimidation, and it's about intimidating because you cannot refute an argument. You can't. Here's the thing. It's this is what all of this is about: refuting, trying to control ideas, and when oftentimes when there's a fact check, it's not actually a fact check. It's simply an article written where the journalist will ask an expert that agrees with the journalist what he or she thinks about what they're trying to refute, and then the fact check will say, well, we spoke to this official, we spoke to this expert, and then the quote is, well, you know what, they have the numbers wrong, or they have this wrong, or they have, and it will just be an opinion, it'll just be a viewpoint, or it'll be an appeal to the consensus or appeal to the prevailing mentality among authorities. The fact checks nowadays often, and this is why they say mostly false, somewhat false, missing context, because they're not fact checks. They're ongoing arguments. They're ongoing arguments, but this is the thing, like, okay, in terms of free speech, there's a point where, like, I understand the mentality that says, say what you want to say what you want to say. But if I, I don't have hundreds of millions of subs, or like, like 3, 4, 5, 6 million. And even if I did, they can pull your channel in 2 seconds. So it's easy to kind of say, oh, you know what? Just say what you want to say. Um, when you're trying to build a presence, or you're trying to communicate your thoughts in an arena where it's very difficult to do so, it's easier for people to say, well, you know what, just go ahead and say what you need to say. You know what? If your channel gets pulled, so what? It's like, doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. If this is your livelihood, or if this is how you make money, then and if other platforms aren't as lucrative, or don't have the same compensation, and it's not that easy. That's why, I mean, I try my best to be myself, and I try my best to balance being as true as I can to myself and to my viewers, but also abiding by protocol, because I have to. This is different. Like 2 years, 3 years ago, on YouTube, 5 years ago, was completely different. Every year, it gets harder to communicate your thoughts. But every industry, like in every industry, every job, you have to deal with obstacles. Hopefully, this era of consequences. So consequences for free speech is another way of saying we're only going to go after conservatives economically, but never liberals. We're only going to go after um, the people we don't like, and we'll go after them through economic means, through boycott, through intimidating advertisers, through intimidating platforms. Okay? Republicans, for example, don't defend free speech. Trump Republicans do. The never Trumpers don't care. So when you have Amy Klobuchar, you have senators writing letters to different platforms, there aren't many Republicans writing letters saying, hey, you can't do that. So, I mean, it's easier said than done. Like, what Joe Rogan has, thank God, is freedom. He has the freedom because money in our society, unfortunately, equals freedom of speech. You can't be canceled if you can't be canceled monetarily. You can be canceled. The one thing the left does, because they have a media monstrosity, like every journalist is a lifelong liberal Democrat that wants one political party to win. And that's not hyperbole, it's just a fact. The days of Peter Jennings or David Brinkley or Tom Brokaw or Ted Koppel, those days are over. Or Walter Cronkite, those days are over. They didn't care if it was a Republican president or a Democratic president. And don't think because Trump pushes the envelope that, they would treat, Jeb Bush any differently. Now they've realized that any political threat, any political opposition must be completely demolished through media. So every apoplectic, baseless claim, that's just fine as long as it's not leveled at a Democrat. And I've been criticized by people, oh, you just focus on the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, they had the media narrative in the early 2000s. They controlled political discourse in many ways in the early 2000s. Now it's the Democratic Party. The one thing, Republicans in the early 2000s definitely tried to cancel people and erase ideas or opposition. But now it's a lot easier to do so because social media is so prevalent. And Democrats have a much easier job, or it's much easier for Democrats to find any voice that they find offensive. So they'll start with saying, well, it's offensive. But Democrats say offensive things all the time. Okay? Joy Behar, Justin Trudeau, Jimmy Kimmel, all of these people have done offensive things, but they're given a free pass. Hunter Biden especially given a free pass. I understand the mentality. Like, I think that there's never been such an emphasis on information deemed harmful. Information has always been viewed as um, data or facts or logic that is processed by people and either resonates with a large number of people or doesn't resonate based on the quality of the information. The problem is information that resonates to millions upon millions of people, let's say 73 million supporters of President Trump, that information is an existential issue for the Democratic Party. They cannot stand that 73 million Americans see the world differently in many ways. And they also can't stand that difference of opinion is rooted in logic and reason and fact. It's not the data or the numbers or the information or the facts. When you have a government bureaucrat saying, well, things changed, they just go along with it. They move the goalposts endlessly. And I'm kind of speaking in roundabout terms. But it could be about every topic. Jerome Powell, for example, okay? Jerome Powell, for example, all right? He says inflation was only temporary, okay? Inflation was only temporary. We're only going to have temporary inflation. Does that make it was inflation temporary, or was it is it now rampant? Was he wrong about that? Was his information harmful to people? When they pushed to end economic activity, were they misinformed when they did that? And we can go on forever. We can go on forever. We have never, growing up, you never heard. Noam Chomsky would be accused of misinformation his entire career if he started out in this, in this world, in this climate. Okay, Christopher Hitchens. Could you imagine if Christopher Hitchens, and God bless his soul, if Christopher Hitchens were alive today, he was an anti-theist. So he was definitely not he didn't adhere to the prevailing mentality or the paradigm of thought. Throughout his life, he was always a polemicist, into debate and dialogue and discourse. They would never allow that. They would never allow that. They would view him to be an extreme conservative provocateur. These are all the euphemisms they use for people they don't like. You can just Christopher Hitchens they would try to silence him. They would try to silence anyone who was effective or who was eloquent, who would be able to communicate their thoughts in a manner that they don't appreciate or deem, or in a manner that would harm them politically. You see, this is like the main thing here is a political battle, which is interesting because you couldn't find somebody less partisan than Joe Rogan. He has people on the left and the right. He speaks to people of all different viewpoints. He's not partisan at all. He's not partisan at all. They don't like him. And then the Hollywood Reporter, right-wing platform. It's not a right-wing platform. Okay? Conservative YouTube rival Rumble. Why does it have to be? It's like, this is the thing with Rumble or other, they don't care if you'd be just fine on those platforms if you were a liberal Democrat. They wouldn't silence your speech either. What makes you like a conservative rival or right wing is that you're actually okay with any viewpoint. These are the people who also claim to oppose an authoritarian. They view Trump to be an authoritarian, and they're the ones who want to stifle debate and discussion. They're the ones who want to stifle debate, stifle discussion, and they're the ones who disown friends. I mean, this is the thing. They can't defeat you in a debate or an argument because it's very easy to refute a lot of the things they say. And today's fact-checking articles are simply, in reality, the last word. They want to be the last word in an ongoing debate or discussion or dialogue. They don't refute anything. They say, well, it's misleading. Everyone in every debate in the history of mankind has viewed the opponent or the opposing viewpoint to be misleading. That's the way you would characterize a viewpoint you don't like. You would say it's misleading, or you would say it's misinformed, or you would say it's lacking context. That's actually what two people, when they're in a debate or when they're arguing or when they're opposing each other's viewpoints, that's the rationale, that's the mentality. Missing context is also a great, that you'll see a fact check and then part of the fact check will be missing context. That's not a fact check. Saying something is missing context is not a fact check. It has nothing to do with a fact check. Ebre! Thank you, Ebre. Thank you to my super chat. Thank you. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, this is about. It's a very vapid way of, like, you would think, George Carlin, love George Carlin, amazing colonel, love George Carlin. You would think that with every single publication out there, CNN, MSNBC, Washington Post, New York Times, New Yorker, Atlantic, BuzzFeed, you would think that Rolling Stone, Mother Jones, New Yorker, Esquire, Vanity Fair, the Atlantic, Time Magazine, all of it, every social media algorithm, especially Twitter, you would think that their ideas, their philosophy on life, their viewpoints would resonate with everyone because they fancy themselves to be the most educated, logical, rational individuals on the planet, the morally superior liberal Democrats. You would think that their viewpoint would resonate with everybody. But half the country does not care about what a Washington Post opinion writer thinks or a New York Times opinion writer. Melinda! Thank you, Melinda! Thank you so much, Melinda. Greatly appreciated. Melinda Little Santos, thank you so very much. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you. Thank you to my super chat. Thank you. I love the emoji. Thank you so much. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you so much. You would think that with every single possible, like Jimmy Kimmel every night. Jimmy Kimmel, by the way, did, if you ask me, worse than that clip, because there was a bit of malice. There was a tiny bit of malice in what Jimmy Kimmel did. Okay, and it wasn't even funny. Okay, and the skit wasn't even funny at all. And there was a tiny bit of malice, and but he apologized, completely forgiven. But Jimmy Kimmel every night just parrots talking points from the Democratic Party, just regurgitates and and echoes the same talking points. So does Trevor Noah. What is the difference between Jimmy Kimmel and Trevor Noah and Seth Meyer and Stephen Colbert? They're the same people. They're the same people. What's the difference between Anderson Cooper and Rachel Maddow and a New York Times opinion writer and a Washington Post opinion writer and a writer at Vanity Fair? They're the same exact people. What's the difference between CNN and a million sub liberal YouTuber? The same person, the same publication, or the same network. The interesting thing is that they've replaced. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you again. Around 2000 or so, like 2000, 2011, 2011, 2012, maybe even 2008, you got like this like atheism and a lot of, you know, pundits who were atheist, maybe led by Christopher Hitchens and others, Richard Dawkins. They made a lot of, rational, good points. What's taken place, however, is that whereas before you had Christopher Hitchens, who didn't have a political agenda, or he had political viewpoints, definitely. And he had his biases like everyone. But he wasn't beholden to a political side. Okay? He had no allegiance to the left or to the right. Same with Joe Rogan. These people are a big problem, a huge problem for media today, because media is an extension of the Democratic Party. It's not reality. They say, well, reality has a liberal bias. No, no, it doesn't. Look at energy costs. Look at the fact that oil is going to break its record high, and fossil fuels are at record highs, despite this apoplectic obsession with combating climate change, which is important. I agree, but if reality had a liberal bias, you wouldn't have fossil fuels at record highs, and you wouldn't be obsessed still with you know what. I mean, those are just two examples. But the rational, logical atheists, or you know, the people who opposed religious dogma, and that oftentimes that dogma is no good. They now worship the state. They worship consensus. They worship the expert opinion of highly educated officials and experts who only adhere to one paradigm of thought, and any dissent, any opposing viewpoint from very qualified experts is viewed as blasphemy, heresy, and oh my God, Joe Rogan spoke to this person, and oh, let's fact check this person. It's like, well, you didn't really fact check anything. You stated things like missing context, or we spoke to this organization, or we spoke to this person and they disagree. I'm trying to communicate in roundabout terms because I have to. Melinda, thank you again. Thank you so very much, Melinda. Thank you. To my super chat, thank you. I think that what Joe Rogan's doing is fantastic. And giving people a different viewpoint is very important. It's not harmful. What's harmful, what actually hurts people and what actually loses lives, is preventing different viewpoints from flourishing. This notion, this absurd idea that information has caused people to lose their lives, you cannot prove that. You simply cannot prove that. You can't prove it in a court of law. You can't prove it anywhere. And you can look at like Brett Weinstein, Joe Rogan. You could look at a whole bunch of people that they're if you just have a podcast where you talk to people and discuss ideas and debate and look at information from a different viewpoint. What on earth is wrong with looking at information from a different viewpoint? When has that ever been wrong? And George Gammon is awesome. George Gammon said something really, really awesome, economist and investor. Um, he said something. He said something so true. When have the people who tried to silence debate ever been on the right side of history? It's so true. When have people who tried to silence debate been on the right side of history? Never. The answer is never. They've never been on the right side of history. So you're looking, ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at a time period where they're actually on the ropes. They're actually on the ropes. It's like, sorry. they're actually like, if you look at it, you might think that this is not going to last. Um, they're not going to last forever. Like what I'm trying to say is this is not going to last forever. Like this apoplectic and hysterical reaction to speech, to viewpoints, to different ways of thinking. This is a fleeting moment in time because you have Democrats in the House, the Senate, the presidency, all of media now is in the tank for one political party. That's not always going to be the case, especially after, look, we're going to have a recession. We're going to have a devastating stock market crash, a recession, and whatever faith people have had in whatever you want to call it, the system or the establishment, that's going to go flying out the window. That's going to go right down the toilet. People are not going to have faith in the politicians that want to silence discussion. They're not going to have faith. They're not going to have faith in a system that says, well, you know what? And it's interesting too, like, and not to like get too deep into the subject because it's forbidden. The fact that things are forbidden is just absurd, but we have to deal with it, or I have to deal with it. Um, the horror, the liberal sensibilities that are like hurt from this, like he spread, uh, you know, misinformation about, and it's like give an example and allow Joe Rogan to refute that example that you gave, or allow the very highly, esteemed experts that he has spoken to refute the accusation. They'll never. Here's the thing with the apology. I understand why he did that. Generally, you shouldn't apologize. Sometimes you should. Sometimes if you did something. So the latest thing, yes, I can understand why he apologized because you can't say the word, and I understand, and I agree with that. Um, but the apology prior, he really didn't have to. But see, this him apologizing is actually in a way a very good thing because it now shifts the focus back onto those who want to silence him. So now we're faced with, oh well, Whoopi Goldberg apologized, so did Jimmy Kimmel, so did Joy Reid. Hunter Biden has yet to apologize, but okay, that's maybe coming. All of these, Justin Trudeau apologized. So when Joe Rogan does, the focus is now back on that political side that is actually riddled with the most offensive speech, and of course they don't level the same consequences on their own political side. So what happens is they'll say, well, free speech is not free. You're not free from consequences. Well, yeah, you are. You are, though. You are free if you are a Democrat or on the left. You're either free, get a free pass, or you don't experience the same consequences, or they're watered down. So he should definitely. I think that it would be fantastic if he did take that. I don't know if Spotify would let him go, though. I don't think Spotify would want him to go. Unless, I mean, I don't know how he could unless Spotify broke any contractual obligation. Maybe removing all those episodes. That's another thing also. It's like, what have you done when you removed Joe Rogan's segments? They're still on the internet. That's the whole point of the internet. They're still on there. So what on earth have you done? You're a better platform for removing certain segments that anybody else can see now? The whole point of you getting Joe Rogan was because the platform that he was on, that I'm on, uh, perhaps made it more difficult for him to run his podcast. So he went to Spotify. Now Spotify is trying to silence him. Or, I mean, not silencing him, but trying to appease the people who want him either canceled or no longer relevant. He's only going to gain. He's like, the certain people like Trump is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of politics. Joe Rogan, different personality, but he's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of media. You can try to strike him down. He's only going to get stronger. He's only going to get exponentially more powerful and stronger. And anywhere he goes, if he goes to Rumble, suddenly that platform becomes a huge player. GB, thank you. Kilgore Trout, thank you. Kilgore Trout, thank you, GB. Kilgore Trout, thank you. This is the thing also. I tried to like convey this, and I don't know if because I'm always trying to. Kilgore Trout, thank you. Melinda, thank you. To my super chat, thank you. When I speak, I'm always trying to abide by the algorithm also. So it makes me even more long-winded and Kilgore Trout, thank you. Um, and sometimes I get lost in the weeds and I just like meander off into Never Never Land. But the concept of information that's harmful is a new concept. It is the most ridiculous, absurd concept. When you have public officials or experts always finding out that their initial viewpoints were wrong, these people don't have the right to then judge or condemn when they hear something that they disagree with. It is okay to disagree with something. This is the problem for morally superior liberal Democrats. What takes place is they can hide. What they do is they have an expertise in a certain field, but they're liberal Democrats. So their ideology is infused with, like, that's who they are as people. Generally, a great many are atheists. So, and that's fine. It's great. No problem. But their religion, their identity is liberal Democrat. It's like it's they worship consensus and how they don't question how the consensus is formed, but they revere it. So they don't question if the consensus was formed through coercion or through intimidation. They don't that's not what they don't care about that. They just want to fit in. And if they're given numbers or information or data that is not accurate, uh, if they deem it to be legitimate or accurate, even if perhaps it's flawed in a number of ways, they all agree upon one viewpoint, and that is the Bible and gospel. That has replaced, a traditional holy book or religious dogma. And so you have these wonderful, rational, morally superior liberal Democrats condemning any viewpoint as heresy and blasphemy. Meanwhile, they're lying or definitely not telling the truth under oath, or lying by omission. Excuse me, or doing things like well, I was going to say they're lying by omission or trying to fact check any opposing viewpoint into oblivion. So they will fact check, and within the fact check, it will say missing context. That is not a fact check. That is another form of debate. You are refuting something. You are trying to issue a rebuttal. That's not necessarily a fact check. Media, the Democratic Party, and this is like a political thing also. The people going after, this was a segment on The Blaze. The people going after Joe Rogan, they're funded by a political organization that sides with the Democratic Party. No, fact check. Ronald, hello. Um, what Joe Rogan does is needed. The interesting thing is that the opposite of when they say that Joe Rogan is spreading harmful information, actually it's the opposite. They're the ones when you stifle discussion, you're actually hurting people on any topic. When you have to coerce or intimidate or bribe anyone to adhere to your viewpoint, you've already lost. You've already lost. You've failed miserably. You have failed miserably. If the only way you can get somebody to agree with you is to intimidate them economically, you have absolutely failed miserably. And that's the only thing they have is economic intimidation. That's the only thing they have is economic intimidation. And that's why, thank God, Joe Rogan can't be canceled. Also, one thing they don't like, there's a lot of jealousy also. Like there's one article here. I won't bring it up, but there's an article. Oh, there's an article saying, "Oh, I tried." There's an article saying, "I tried to like Joe Rogan, I just couldn't." And it's like, well, you know what? 100 million people a month love his channel. He must be doing something right. He must be doing something right. I mean, that's like that's the thing. It's like you have two different you have the Titanic and CNN, the Hindenburg and MSNBC, and then you have like, a spaceship in Joe Rogan. So they're jealous. It's also like they know that Joe Rogan is only going to gain in popularity. He's not going to this is making him more popular. This is not making him less popular. And this is the very final, like, once the House and Senate go Trump Republican, it's a different ballgame. Because they're going to impeach Mashed Potato Brains and they're going to investigate him and Hunter. And everybody else that they wanted to investigate. Probably Madam Secretary as well. So, and the Durham probe will be expanding. All of these things will take place. Missy, so can I. I think I could as well. But yeah, I mean, he should. He should go. I don't really know. I don't know if he will, but he should. It would be amazing. Again, it's like it'll be interesting what happens in the next um It'll be very interesting what happens in the next couple of months or year. It'll be interesting. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I will have a live stream later tonight. Um, I will have a live stream tonight at around 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Please be there. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been wonderful. To my super chat, thank you so much. Be here tonight at around 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Pacific time, ladies and gentlemen. Eric, thank you. Luke, thank you. Everybody.